Hi friends, welcome back to the studio. Today I have a festive watercolor project for you that is perfect for beginners. We're going to do the negative painting technique. You'll start off by wetting down your paper. Make sure that it is evenly coated. You should have a nice sheen of water on your paper. And then we'll start off with the holly leaves. So you'll use a blue-green, a very, very light wash of blue-green across your entire page. I'm pulling right out of the pan here, and sometimes you'll get more concentrated colors like we've got right here, but since the paper is so wet, it's easy to work it right on in to the cotton. Let that dry completely, and then come back in with your stencil. I'm using a mini cookie cutter here, and you're going to scatter some of the shapes across your page. Be sure to leave space between each of the leaves because we're going to do additional layers here, and you want to be able to fit in more holly leaves as we go along. After you've traced those out, you want to go ahead and mix up some more blue-green in your palette. You want this to be slightly darker than the shade that we just did. So after you mix up your color, dip your brush into the water and then go back in and pick up some of the paint. By the way, if you are new to negative painting, it's a technique where you paint around the shapes and the subject of your painting as opposed to filling them in directly. That creates really nice layered dimension, and it is perfect for holiday inspired subjects like these leaves, and in the second half of this video we will do Christmas trees. Don't worry if you're not being super precise here. Watercolor has a mind of its own, and those soft edges can add to the charm of your painting. I'm using 100% cotton watercolor paper here. This is 140 pounds, and this is cut to 5 by 5 inches. And then I've taped off a 1/2 inch border all the way around so that we have a nice clean edge to work with. Between each of these layers, you want to make sure that your paper dries completely, and you can either let it air dry, or if you want to move things along, you can definitely use a hair dryer. I often do that to speed up the process a little bit. We're on to the next layer. So you're going to scatter more leaves and work them evenly around the leaves that you did in the first layer and alter the angles a little bit to create visual interest. Once you've added more leaves, you'll add another layer of blue-green watercolor, and this will be a little bit more concentrated. You can do that by adding more of the pigment to your mix and using a little bit less water on your brush. As you start laying down more leaves in this project, it can get a little bit more complicated when you're painting, so just remember that you're painting around anything that is a leaf, and you're just concentrating the paint on the background of the painting. If you make a mistake on your painting, like I just did right here, don't worry because this is a very forgiving technique. You can paint over the shape. So I'm painting over the holly leaf that I accidentally went into. And as we do additional layers, that will basically be unnoticeable. So don't panic if that happens to you. Just persevere and keep going. Your painting is not ruined. Let that layer dry, and then you will come back in with your cute little cookie cutter, and we're going to add some more leaves. At this point, space will be getting pretty tight, so you may want to go along and add the paint as you make each leaf, because the pencil marks are going to be kind of tough to see. So keep this easy on yourself and just have some deeper, darker color mixed up and ready to go. You'll trace the leaf and then come right back in with your paint to mark out the outline. So at this point, you know the drill. Let this layer dry, and then it is time for the exciting part. You're going to take a gold pen or marker and come back in and trace around the very top layer of leaves. So this will be your very lightest layer, the first one that we did, and you're just accenting that with some metallic gold to make it shine. I have all the exact supplies tagged in the description below in case you're curious what I'm using here. I'm using the Faber-Castell metallic marker, and they list it as a pen, but it functions more like a marker. So don't be surprised if you do order this. That is what you'll be getting. After this step, you will take off the tape that you've got around the border and reveal those beautiful clean edges in your gorgeous painting, and we will go right into Christmas trees. So for this one, we're going to be using a yellow-based green just to switch it up a little bit, but staying with the classic green. I've already got a little bit in my mixing well here. So after you've put a wet wash of clean water on your paper, go back through, add a little bit of pigment, and let that dry. Then you will come back in with your mini cookie cutter or whatever stencil you are using for this tutorial and scatter those across your paper. Be sure to mix up the angles a little bit just so that they're going in all different directions. And then you're going to take a slightly deeper wash of that yellow-green. I'm using a size 12 brush here, and it strikes a good mix of having a nice fine point for going along the edges of the trees, and then a nice large belly so that you can cover large areas more quickly with your paint. You may want to play around a little bit with your brushes, but in general, I recommend using a larger brush for the first couple of layers, and then switching to a smaller brush, which you'll see me do later on in the video. When you get into much smaller spaces, it'll make your life a lot easier. Once you've completed this layer, let it dry completely, and then you'll come back in with your stencil and trace some additional trees onto your painting. I'm using a 2H pencil here, which means that the graphite is on the harder side, which means that it leaves very light pencil marks on the paper. You can also use a regular pencil and just either go very lightly or come back through and erase some of the pencil lines just so that you can see a very faint outline for when you come back in with your paint. Now you're going to mix up a paint wash that has a little bit more pigment to it, and you'll use a little bit less water on your brush here. This is the really beautiful part of watercolor, layering those different values. So we started with the very lightest value in this painting, and then we're working our way all the way through to very dark values. If you're just here for the painting and the fun creativity, you don't have to worry about that part of it. But if you are also looking to pick up some watercolor tips, I like to drop in little gems and tips along the way. For this layer, you will of course be using a darker shade of that yellow-green, and you'll accomplish that by using a little bit more pigment in your mix and less water on your brush. When you have less water on your brush, it will dry out faster as you're working through your painting, so you'll need to dip it in the water a little bit more often, pick up a little bit more of that pigment, and go back into your painting to continue on. For the deepest, darkest layer, you'll probably find it easiest to lay down your stencil and trace the outline. It'll be very small at this point, and then come back in right away with the very darkest color of the yellow-green. And you'll work your way around the painting like that, as opposed to using the stencil all the way around at first and then painting, because once we get into the darker values here, it'll be trickier to see the pencil lines that you put down. So it'll be easiest to work from pencil outline to painting, pencil outline to painting, and so on until you completely finish, and then we will be ready for the magical gold marker. This layer is definitely one where a smaller brush is your friend. I'm using a size 0 brush here. This is the Princeton Snap Brush. This is really great because it does snap back into place. It gives you a lot of precision. Once that layer is totally dry, come back in with your gold marker or your gold pen and trace around the very first layer of Christmas trees. This will give it a little bit of metallic shimmer, which is really pretty, and it'll still keep that minimalist modern vibe that's going on with this piece. You can either use this as actual art, or you could even use it as a really beautiful Christmas card. The final step will be to remove your tape and reveal those gorgeous clean borders. Thank you so much for joining me for this tutorial. I hope you really enjoyed it and you're very proud of your pieces, and I hope to see you again soon.